The door hadn't fully closed behind me when Carlo's hand caught my elbow, spun me around, and pressed me back against the foyer wall. Both hands settled on my waist, pinning me in place. His mouth found mine, hard, claiming no warning. I froze for half a second, then I shoved him back, hard, both palms flat against his chest. "Carlo, what the hell? You are my wife, Mia Cara." His voice was low, his breath warm against my jaw as he leaned in again. "You sleep in my bed." But I watched the way you looked at him for 15 minutes, and every second of it I was deciding how to break him. "He's Riley's fencing coach," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was being polite. "You were smiling," he murmured against my skin. "People smile, Carlo. It's a social convention." He kissed me, and I let it go on longer than I should have. His hand slid up my back, pulling me closer, and my fingers found his collar the way they always did, automatic, without permission from the rest of me. This was about Liam Cooper, a fencing coach in Coconut Grove that Carlo had watched me talk to for 15 minutes without saying a single word. What he didn't know yet was that Liam was actually my son's biological father. Welcome to today's story. If you're already caught up in Laura and Carlo's world, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It lets me know you're loving the drama, and it keeps me working through the night to bring you intriguing new stories every single day. That said, let's continue. The veil was hand-stitched, and I couldn't stop pulling at the edges. "Laura, stop." Raven slapped my hand away and stepped back, looking me over with a grin plastered on her face. "The groom is going to lose his mind when he sees you." I stared at my reflection, white silk, clean lines, my mother's pearl earrings that I almost didn't wear, and adjusted a fold in my sleeve that didn't need adjusting. This marriage wasn't romance. 2 families, 2 empires, 1 deal. My father's legitimate business merging with the largest underground dynasty on the eastern seaboard. The Romanos needed our clean money and political reach. We needed their ports, their protection, their territory. And I was the signature on the dotted line, wrapped in Italian lace. I didn't hate the arrangement. I'd resigned myself to having a business marriage since I was 18 years old. Might as well marry into a powerful family. I was marrying the eldest Romano son. I'd never met him. But my father assured me he had no issue with Riley, my 4-year-old, and I never corrected anyone's assumption that Riley was biologically mine. What's the point? Raven fussed with my train, still grinning. "Okay, but real talk. What if he's ugly? What if he can't hold a candle to Carlo?" My fingers stopped on the veil. "Carlo." The tightening came fast, across my ribs, up the base of my throat. My pulse spiked, and I pressed my thumbnail into my ring finger to steady it. 7 years ago. A young man who worked doubles at a garage downtown, grease under his fingernails, cheap wine and yellow flowers, eyes that swallowed me whole every time I walked into a room. I'd sat across from him at a diner booth and told him, while his coffee went cold, that what we had was temporary, a limited time experience, a novelty I was tired of. Those were my exact words. I'd watched his hands go still on the table. I'd watched his mouth open and close without sound. Then I'd got on a plane to Florence, and Elle never looked back. I left him because he had nothing, because my father expected more, because I was 21 and convinced that I could outrun love. "Laura!" Raven snapped a finger in front of me. "What are you thinking about so intently?" "Nothing." I smoothed the front of my dress. Carlo is ancient history. The doors opened downstairs. Strings swelled through the villa. A classical piece chosen to announce arrival. The wedding coordinator pressed her earpiece. "The groom is on his way up. He'll need to find the bridal shoes before the ceremony. Grandma Maggie's tradition. Hide the shoes, make him search. If he finds them, then he's qualified to be the groom." Voices climbed the staircase, laughter and heavy footsteps. The coordinator confirmed the name into her mic for the procession. "Carlo Romano is entering the bridal suite." My hand stilled on the vanity. Carlo Romano. What a coincidence. Half the Italian men in the city were named Carlo. The groom was supposed to be Giovanni Romano, the eldest son, if I remember correctly. Something must have changed. A different son, maybe. A cousin. It didn't matter to me. As long as it isn't. The door opened, and every excuse I'd just built collapsed. Taller, broader, the softness of his 20s stripped away into hard angles, jaw sharper, shoulders wider, a posture that owned every inch of space it occupied. Black suit cut close, hair pushed back, exposing a tiny scar above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. His eyes landed on mine and stayed. "There she is." Raven looked between us, confused. The bridesmaids giggled, reading romance where there was none. Carlo moved through the room with easy confidence, checking under chairs, behind curtains. He found the first shoe inside a vase, held it up, and the room cheered. Then he knelt in front of me. His hand slid under the hem of my dress. Warm fingers found my ankle and traveled upward, slowly, while the room whooped and cameras flashed. His thumb grazed the inside of my knee and pressed there. He felt the shoe. "Jerk," I said through my teeth, keeping the smile plastered on my face for the cameras. His voice dropped below the noise, meant only for me. "If all these people weren't here right now, my hand wouldn't stop here." He stood up and lifted me from the couch. The second shoe fell out from my dress. He grinned proudly for the cameras while the bridesmaids swooned. I smiled back. The ceremony blurred past. Vows I didn't mean, rings exchanged with steady hands, a kiss so brief his lips barely touched mine. We weren't alone until the reception was in full swing 2 floors below, bass thumping through marble walls. "So explain this to me, Carlo." I turned on him the moment the door clicked shut. "You just happen to be the Romano son that my father arranged this marriage with." He leaned against the window ledge, the city skyline behind him, tie loosened, bourbon in hand. "Giovanni was the original pick, but Giovanni's been making problems for the family. Debts, enemies, things my father can't clean up anymore." He took a slow sip. "So the arrangement shifted to me. Then we agree that this is purely strategic." I kept my voice level. "Can we both also agree to keep things civil? Leave the past where it belongs and focus on the deal. Both families benefit, and we don't need to make this any more complicated than—" "No." He set the glass down on the window ledge, and the sound was sharp in the quiet room. "The only reason I agreed to this marriage was to secure my position in the family, but I'll be damned if I intend to make it easy for you." I drew in a deep breath, stood up, and went over to the counter. I poured a shot of whiskey and downed it all at once. "Fine, but our marriage stays on paper. You want separate bedrooms and polite handshakes at fundraisers and a neat little arrangement where we pretend 7 years didn't happen." He pushed off the ledge and walked toward me. "That's your version, Laura, not mine." "Then what's your version? You don't get to set the terms this time, not after what you did to me." The muscles in my neck tightened. "That was 7 years ago, Carlo. 7 years, 4 months, and 11 days. He said it without blinking. "Don't talk to me about a marriage in name only. Don't even let that thought finish forming in your head." He walked past me toward the bedroom door, paused with his hand on the frame. "Get some sleep, Mrs. Romano. We have a long life ahead of us." The door closed and I stood there in my wedding dress, jaw locked, hands trembling at my sides. I stayed in the living room for a long time, listening to the silence of the massive, unfamiliar house, waiting for my pulse to slow down. When the fabric of my gown began to feel suffocating, I finally forced myself up and headed to the master bedroom to freshen up. I pushed the door open quietly, but stopped dead in my tracks. Carlo was already there, just out of the bathroom, shirtless, wearing only a pair of dark pajama bottoms, reaching for a cotton shirt on the bed. As he turned toward the mirror, the movement drew my eyes straight to the right side of his ribcage. In dark, sharp script curving perfectly along the bone, faded just enough to show its age, were the words, "Laura Wrong." TMOL. My hand found the doorframe, supporting my sudden weight. Why did he still have my name tattooed on him, still branded as the magic of my life, after everything I did to him? Carlo saw me through the mirror. He pulled the cotton shirt over his head, hiding it. My voice was barely above a whisper. You never got rid of it." "Why would I get rid of it?" His voice dropped an octave. He turned slowly and walked toward me until the heat radiating off his skin pressed against mine. I closed my eyes, instinctively tilting my face up toward his. His breath brushed my lips. Then he laughed, short, hollow, with absolutely nothing behind it. "I kept it on purpose, Laura." His mouth brushed my ear, his voice barely a murmur. "Every time I look in the mirror, I remember that you are the mistake of my life." He stepped back, his eyes completely empty. He walked over to the bed, slid under the covers, and closed his eyes. "Turn off the light when you're finished." I stood frozen by the doorframe, my palm pressed against the wood where his presence still lingered. The script of my own name seared behind my eyelids. I peeled off the wedding dress, stood under the shower until the hot water ran out, and then climbed onto my side of the bed. I stared at the ceiling for God knows how long before sleep finally took me. When I came downstairs the next morning, Riley was in the foyer with his arms locked around Carlo's leg, face tilted up with the widest grin I'd seen on him in months. "Daddy!" Carlo looked down at the boy, then up at me. I watched him doing the math. Riley's age, the years I was in Florence, the timeline that pointed to conclusions I had no intention of correcting. Let him believe what he wants. Let him think I replaced him. Carlo crouched to Riley's level and his voice changed, went soft in a way I hadn't heard since we were 21. "Hey, buddy." Riley grabbed his face with both small hands and buried himself into Carlo's neck. That afternoon, I picked Riley up from daycare early and stood outside his classroom door adjusting my coat when the voices drifted through. "Riley doesn't have a dad. My mom said his mom isn't even married." My nails bit into my palms. Footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate. Carlo walked past without acknowledging me, pushed the classroom door open, and filled the doorway. "Riley." Every child in that room went still. Riley's face cracked wide open with joy, and he launched from his chair, sprinting across the linoleum and crashing into Carlo's legs. "You came to pick me?" Riley squealed. Carlo scooped him up with one arm and looked at the two boys who'd been talking. He didn't speak. He just stood there holding my son, and those boys shrank back in their chairs. In the car, Riley talked nonstop. Dinosaurs, drawings, the Father's Day campout his school was planning. Could Carlo come? Would he come? Please? Carlo caught my eye in the rearview mirror. I turned to the window. After Riley was in bed, I found Carlo in his study, maps and contracts laid across the desk, a phone open to messages in Italian. "Riley's school is doing a Father's Day camping trip. He wants you there." Carlo turned a page without looking up. "I've got meetings that whole week, Laura." "I'm not asking you to rearrange your life. I'm telling you what your son asked for." That word, your son, landed in the room and we both heard it. He set his pen down and looked at me for the first time, the desk lamp carving his face in half with light and shadow. "If you want something from me, Laura, I need to hear you ask for it properly. Full sentence. The word please should be in there somewhere." My jaw tightened. "Please come to the camping trip with Riley. He's 4 years old and kids at his school are telling him he doesn't have a father and it's breaking his heart. Please." He leaned back. "I'll go. But you're squeezing toothpaste on my brush every morning for a month. That is the most ridiculous. And I want a massage tonight, 30 minutes, non-negotiable." I stood there weighing my pride against my son's face, and my pride lost. I stepped behind his chair and placed my hands on his shoulders, feeling the dense warmth of his muscles through the fabric. As I dug my thumbs into the knots along his spine, he let out a slow exhale, leaning back into my touch. My hands worked deeper, tracing the broad width of his back until I realized, too late, that my own breathing had gone shallow. I stopped. "Time's up." He turned his head just enough to catch my eye. "You sure that's the reason you stopped?" I pulled my hands away and walked to the door. "Laura." I stopped with my hand on the frame. "I don't know how, but I already care about that boy." His voice was stripped down. No edge, no game. "And it's just been a day. Going forward, whatever war you and I are fighting, let's keep him out of it. We clear?" "Crystal." "Good." I closed the door and stood in the dark hallway, the ghost of his body heat still clinging to my palms. On my way to the kitchen for water, I passed the back windows and stopped. The garden was full of white lilies, rows and rows of them, planted in every bed surrounding the house, glowing faintly under the porch lights. They hadn't been there before. The next morning, I asked the housekeeper when they were planted. "Oh, Mr. Romano ordered those weeks ago," she said, refilling Riley's juice. "Right after the wedding date was set, had a whole crew come in overnight." I looked out at the lilies, then at Carlo, who was cutting Riley's pancakes into dinosaur shapes at the kitchen table, not looking at me. I poured my coffee and sat down across from them. 5 days after the wedding, Carlo drove us to my father's house for Sunday dinner. The old Coral Gables estate with the terracotta roof and the jasmine growing wild along the iron gates. My father bought it before I was born and refused to leave even after the neighborhood changed twice around him. The front steps were freshly washed and still wet. The housekeeper, Maria, called out from the doorway, "Careful, Laura, the tiles are still slippery." Before I could adjust my footing, Carlo's arm hooked around my waist and my feet left the ground. He carried me up the steps and through the front door with one arm, while my father stood in the foyer with a glass of red wine and a grin he didn't bother hiding. Grandma Maggie clasped her hands together from her armchair. "Now that's a husband." I smacked Carlo's shoulder. "Put me down." He set me on my feet in the living room, straightened my blouse where it had ridden up, and shook my father's hand without missing a beat. My father looked at me over Carlo's shoulder and raised his eyebrows. I ignored him. Dinner was loud. My father had made his famous snapper, bragging between bites that he'd caught it himself off Key Biscayne that morning. Grandma Maggie had insisted on making her garlic butterfish, the one dish she'd been perfecting for 30 years and had never once gotten right. The flesh was chalky, the butter burned, and the garlic hit the back of your throat with a bitterness that made your eyes water. Carlo took a bite, chewed, swallowed. "Mrs. Wrong, this is the best fish I've had since my mother's cooking." Grandma Maggie beamed. My father nodded approvingly. I stared at Carlo across the table. He didn't flinch. The man had just eaten charcoal dressed in lemon and called it a delicacy. "Smooth talker," I muttered. He heard me. The corner of his mouth lifted, but he kept his eyes on Grandma Maggie, who was already offering him a second helping. He accepted. My father set his wine down and leaned forward. "So, when are you two getting the legal paperwork filed? The wedding was beautiful, but you know how I feel about loose ends." Carlo wiped his mouth with his napkin. "Already scheduled, the 2nd of next month." The wine hit the back of my throat wrong, and I coughed hard enough to draw the whole table's attention. June 2nd. Out of every day in every month he could have chosen, the exact date I sat across from him in that diner booth and told him he was a novelty I'd grown tired of and ended our relationship. "You okay, sweetheart?" my father asked. "Wrong pipe." I reached for the water glass but grabbed the wine instead and drank deeply. Carlo watched me. "You should slow down with that." "I'm fine." I poured another glass. "Laura, your tolerance has always been—" "I said I'm fine." Grandma Maggie laughed and patted Carlo's hand. "Oh, let her be. A little bickering is healthy. It means there's fire. That means you two will last." I drained the glass, poured another. My father started telling Carlo about his boat, and I stopped listening because the date was ringing in my skull. By the time we left, I was 3 sheets past gone. Carlo had his arm around my waist, guiding me down the freshly dried steps, and I let him because my legs had stopped cooperating. In the car, I turned on him. "June 2nd, Carlo. Are you going to sit there and tell me that was a coincidence?" He kept his eyes on the road. "I don't know what you're talking about." What kind of man files his marriage paperwork on the exact anniversary of the day he got dumped? If that's not revenge, I don't know what is. "Laura, if you hadn't brought it up tonight, I wouldn't have even remembered what happened on that date." His voice infuriatingly calm. "But you remembered it instantly. So maybe the better question is, why does that day mean so much to you?" I opened my mouth, closed it. The street lights blurred past the window, and I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Back at the mansion, he walked me upstairs, sat me on the edge of the bed, and disappeared into the kitchen. He came back with a warm mug. "Honey water. Drink it now or you'll hate yourself in the morning." I took the mug, took a sip, looked up at him standing over me, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, and something in my drunk brain misfired. I puckered my lips. He went very still. His eyes dropped to my mouth. He leaned in just barely, and I could feel the shift in the air between us. I spat the honey water directly into his face. He stood there, dripping, blinking. I smiled, sloppy and satisfied, and set the mug on the nightstand. "Good night, Mr. Romano." He wiped his face with his sleeve, looked at me for a long moment, and left without a word. I woke up the next morning with my head splitting and my arms wrapped around something warm and solid. My cheek was pressed against cotton that smelled clean, soap, cedar, the smell of him. I tightened my grip and exhaled. "Laura," his voice was low and very controlled, "you need to let go of me right now." My eyes flew open. I was curled into Carlo's side, one arm around his torso, one leg thrown over his. I scrambled backward so fast I nearly fell off the bed. He was already up, walking to the bathroom, and he didn't look back. I pressed my palms against my burning face and wished the mattress would open up and swallow me whole. Carlo and Riley came back from the camping trip on a Saturday afternoon, both sunburned, both grinning. Riley ran into the living room and thrust his fist at me. "Mommy, look what I caught!" A rubber insect, fat, green, horrifyingly realistic, landed on my lap. The scream that came out of me was not dignified. I launched off the couch and grabbed the nearest solid thing, which happened to be Carlo. My fingers dug into his shirt, my face buried against his chest, my body pressed flush against his, before my brain caught up with my reflexes. Riley doubled over laughing, then bolted down the hallway yelling something about showing the housekeeper his camping badges. I let go, stepped back, smoothed my hair. That wasn't funny. It was a little funny, Carlos said. His hand was still on my waist. He hadn't let go when I did. I looked down at his hand, then up at his face. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't decode. Something warm beneath the surface that he shuddered the moment I met his eyes. Then he leaned in and kissed me. His mouth found mine with purpose, and his free hand came up to the side of my neck, his thumb tracing my jawline. I pulled back. "What are you doing? Paparazzi!" He tilted his head toward the window. "They've been parked across the street since this morning. If we're going to sell this marriage to the public, we need to give them something worth printing." I glanced at the window. Tinted SUV, long lens visible through the gap in the curtain. He was right. The families needed this to look real. I kissed him back. My hand on his chest, his fingers threaded into the hair at the nape of my neck, and I felt the heat climb up my spine. When I finally broke away, breathing harder than I wanted to be, I straightened my blouse. "I think they got enough." "They're still there," he said, reaching for me again. I looked out the window. The SUV was gone. I turned back to him. He didn't blink. "You're unbelievable. And you kissed me twice." He walked past me toward the kitchen. "Riley, what do you want for dinner?" At school the following week, Riley's teacher gathered the families for a group photo after the camping awards ceremony. Riley tugged my hand and pointed at Carlos' phone. "Daddy already posted the picture. Mommy, you have to post it too." I checked Carlos' social media. There it was. The three of us, Riley between us holding a first-place ribbon, Carlos' arm around my shoulder, my head tilted slightly toward him in a way I didn't remember doing. He'd posted it within minutes, no caption. I put my phone away and didn't post anything. That evening Raven called. I could hear her practically vibrating through the speaker. "Laura, the lilies, I looked it up, and white lilies represent the return of happiness. He planted an entire garden of them before you even moved in. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That man is still in love with you." Raven, he called me the mistake of his life. Those aren't the words of a man in love. Those are exactly the words of a man in love who got his heart ripped out and is too proud to admit he came back for more. Laura, think about it. The tattoo, the flowers, the way he is with Riley. I don't believe in love, Raven. I never have. It's a fantasy that ends the second things get hard, and I'd rather have a business arrangement that both parties benefit from than some romantic fantasy that falls apart the moment someone better comes along. The words were barely out of my mouth when I heard the floorboard creak behind me. I turned. Carlos stood in the hallway, jacket in hand, keys in the other. He'd heard everything. I could tell by the way his jaw was set, tight, locked, the muscle near his ear pulsing. He didn't say a word. He put his jacket on, walked past me, and the front door opened and closed with a quiet click that was worse than any slam. "Laura?" Raven's voice was tinny through the speaker. "Laura, what just happened?" I stood in the empty hallway holding my phone against my chest. "He heard me." "Oh no, Laura. It doesn't matter. I meant what I said. Did you, though?" I hung up. Raven didn't know the full story. She didn't know that I was 9 years old when my mother packed a suitcase while my father was at work, knelt in front of me, promised she'd be back by morning, and never came home. She left us for a man she'd been seeing behind my father's back, a man she said she loved, a man she chose over her daughter. I sat on the bottom step of the staircase, in the house my husband had filled with white lilies, and I told myself I was right not to believe. That night, a heavy weight shifting on the mattress jerked me out of a deep sleep. I blinked against the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs. Carlo sat on the edge of the bed. His tie was gone, his shirt was untucked, and the sharp scent of whiskey reached me before my eyes fully adjusted to the dim light. "Laura," he murmured, his voice thick and rough. "You owe me toothpaste." I pushed myself up onto my elbows, squinting at him. "It's 2 a.m, Carlo. You're drunk." "We had a deal," he muttered, sounding less like a powerful businessman and more like a stubborn, grumpy kid. I want it now. The sheer ridiculousness of it snapped my patience. "Go find someone else to squeeze your toothpaste. I'm sure there's no shortage of volunteers." His hand found my jaw, gentle despite the bourbon. He turned my face toward his. "There has never been anyone else, Laura." His voice cracked on my name, and he didn't try to fix it. "From the beginning to now, every single day of the last 7 years, there has only been you." He kissed me. His mouth was desperate, clumsy, and heavy with alcohol. I felt the heat of it everywhere, in my chest, in my fingers, in the base of my spine. My hands came up to fist the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer before my brain could stop my reflexes. His arm wrapped around my waist, lifting me flush against him, completely erasing every argument I'd spent years building. Then my eyes fluttered open. The faint light from the hallway caught a smear of bright, unmistakable red on the side of his neck, just below his left ear. Lipstick. And it was fresh. I shoved him. Hard. Both hands flat against his chest, throwing all my weight behind it. He fell back against the nightstand, making the lamp rattle against the wood. "Get out!" "Huh?" Carlo blinked, his eyes dark with desire, his face completely blank with confusion. "Laura, what?" "I said get out!" I snapped, scrambling to my feet, my voice shaking with a rage I couldn't control. "There has only ever been me. Then whose lipstick is on your neck, Carlo? Because it's sure as hell not mine." He reached up, his fingers brushing against his neck. He looked at his fingertips in the dim light. The confusion on his face was incredibly convincing, but I was past caring. "I need you to get out of this room. Now." He stood up, swaying slightly, his mouth open as he tried to find the words. I watched him realize I wasn't listening. He turned, his heavy footsteps retreating across the floor, and a moment later, the guest room door closed down the hall. I sat on the edge of the bed, my lips still burning from his kiss, my hands fisted in the sheets. I did not cry. I refused to let him have that, too. By morning, the photo was everywhere. Raven sent the tabloid headline first, a grainy shot of a woman in a red dress pressed against Carlo's neck at a bar. The angle was damning. I turned my buzzing phone face down on the counter. Carlo entered the kitchen, dark circles under his eyes, and started, "Laura, let me explain last night. That woman... You don't owe me an explanation." I kept my voice flat, packing Riley's lunchbox. "This is a business marriage. What you do on your own time is your business." "Laura, I didn't." "Riley, breakfast," I called out. Carlo lingered in the doorway, then left without another word. 2 days later, the press ambushed me outside the office. A wall of microphones and flashing cameras cut off my path. "Mrs. Romano, can you confirm the affair? Is the marriage over?" Before security could clear a path, a sleek SUV pulled up and Carlo stepped out. He walked straight to my side and faced the microphones, pulling out his phone. "This is unedited surveillance footage from the bar," Carlo announced, showing the screen to the cameras. It clearly showed the woman grabbing him, Carlo pushing her away, and walking out alone. A reporter yelled from the back, "Then is this marriage real or just a business arrangement?" Carlo looked across the crowd as his hand took mine. "Laura Wrong is my first love. We separated years ago when she went abroad, and this marriage brought us back together. Does that answer your question?" The crowd erupted. I stood frozen behind my sunglasses as my husband told the entire city of Miami that he'd never stopped loving me. Neither of us spoke in the car until we were 6 blocks away. "You didn't have to do that," I muttered. "Yes, I did. Carlo, we agreed to keep this. I never agreed to anything except marrying you." He kept his eyes on the road. That evening, I found him in his study. I stood in the open doorway and struggled to find the right words. "If you're here to apologize, just say it," he said without looking up from his laptop. I jumped to conclusions about the lipstick and the photo. "I should have let you explain." "Before you threw me out of our bedroom?" He finally looked up. "Yeah, you should have. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology, Laura." He leaned back in his chair. "I want you to squeeze toothpaste on my brush tomorrow morning. And I want you to trust me when I tell you something, instead of assuming the worst because it's easier than believing the truth." I nodded. "Okay, good." He turned back to his screen. "Close the door on your way out." That night I dreamed about us from before, his garage apartment with a broken radiator. Dancing barefoot in his kitchen to his favorite song, his laugh, the way he used to say my name, soft and full. I woke up smiling, and he was right there. Propped on one elbow, watching me. "What were you dreaming about?" The smile vanished and heat flooded my face. "Nothing. It was nothing." "You were smiling in your sleep, Laura. Don't tell me you dreamt of..." I threw the covers off and practically ran to the bathroom. Behind me, I heard him laughing, the real one this time, and I closed the door and pressed my back against it until my heartbeat settled. The next morning, I came downstairs with Riley to find Carlo in the backyard, in a tank top, doing pull-ups on a bar in the private outdoor gym. His back muscles contracted and released in the early light, sweat tracking down his spine. Riley shrieked with excitement and ran out to join him. Carlo dropped from the bar, crouched down, and let Riley hang from his back while counting reps for him. He saw me watching from the doorway and the corner of his mouth lifted. "Come join us. You used to train with me." My eyes went from the dumbbell to him, breathing hard, watching me with that infuriating half smile. He knew what he was doing, but I wasn't falling for it. So I turned and walked back inside. "I know you were looking," he called after me. I was not. I kept walking. He caught up to me in the kitchen, still breathing hard, and before I could reach for the coffee pot, his hand caught my wrist and he turned me around. His free hand settled on my hip. He was close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his body and smell the sweat and morning air on his skin. He kissed me. Slower than the drunk kiss, steadier, his mouth moving against mine with the kind of deliberateness that made my knees unreliable. I grabbed the counter behind me with one hand and his shoulder with the other. And I kissed him back, because my body had stopped listening to my brain weeks ago. "Mommy, come watch me!" Riley yelled from the yard. I broke away and escaped into the hallway. At lunch the next day, I sat across from Raven at a bistro on Brickell and told her the truth before I could talk myself out of it. "I want him, Raven." She set her iced tea down. "I'm sorry, what?" "Not emotionally. I don't want feelings or promises or any of that. I just want him, physically." "Laura, wrong. You're describing wanting to sleep with your own husband. That is literally what marriage is." "This isn't a real marriage. You two have been making out. What else is there?" "That was a reflex. Girl, I'm serious. I want to keep this physical, an arrangement within the arrangement." Raven opened her mouth to respond, but her eyes flickered past my shoulder, and her expression rearranged itself entirely. I turned. Carlo and Sal, his right hand, built square and perpetually amused, were crossing the restaurant floor. Carlo pulled out the chair next to mine without asking and sat down. Sal dropped into the seat beside Raven and immediately reached for the breadbasket. "We were having a private conversation," I said, "in a public restaurant." Carlo flagged the waiter. "Bourbon. Neat." Raven kicked me under the table. I ignored her. Lunch turned into drinks. Drinks turned into a second round. Sal told a story about a deal gone wrong in Havana that had Raven crying with laughter, her hand on his arm. Carlo's knee pressed against mine under the table and stayed there. I didn't move it. The bourbon loosened something in his face. The hard edges softened, and when he looked at me, his eyes held a warmth I kept trying to look away from. By 10 o'clock, we were at a rooftop bar downtown, the four of us crowded into a booth, the skyline smeared with heat and city light. Raven was dancing with Sal near the railing. I was on my fourth drink, and the room had started to tilt. Carlo's hand found the small of my back. His thumb traced a slow circle against my spine, and my skin prickled under the fabric. "You're staring at me," he said. "You're good-looking, and I'm drunk." "Oh, am I?" I turned to face him fully. His mouth was close, and I wanted to wipe that grin off his face. His jaw was dark with stubble, the neon from the bar sign catching the scar above his eyebrow. My fingers found his collar and pulled. We didn't make it to a second bar. We barely made it through the front door. I woke up tangled in sheets that smelled of cedar and bourbon and warm skin. My head throbbed. Sunlight cut across the bed in a hard diagonal. Carlo was on his back beside me, one arm behind his head, awake, staring at the ceiling. "I'm not asking you to confess anything." His voice was rough with sleep. He turned his head and looked at me. "But don't lie to me either. Tell me there's a fraction of what you felt 7 years ago still in there. 1%. That's all it takes to keep a door open." I pulled the sheet higher against my chest. "Carlo, 1%, Laura." I stared at the window, morning light cutting long, gold rectangles across the floor. "I don't have that to give. At least a business marriage lasts, and we both get what we want." He pulled his arm away and sat up. The sheet fell, and the tattoo on his ribs caught the light. "I don't know what I did to deserve falling for someone who won't let herself fall back." His voice was stripped raw. "But I need you to hear this. My feelings for you don't have an expiration date. If you ever let yourself trust me, even once, you won't feel pain. You won't feel abandoned. I will always be there when you reach for me. That door doesn't close. Not ever." Every word cut through me. My throat burned, my hands gripped the sheets, and then the image rose, my mother kneeling in front of me, her suitcase by the door, her promise to be back by morning. I got dressed and went to work without looking back. Riley started fencing lessons the following month at a studio in Coconut Grove. Carlo drove us. He'd cleared his afternoon, which he never did, and I didn't ask why. Riley was halfway through his drills when a young man walked over from the older group and crouched next to him, adjusting his grip on the foil. Late 20s, clean-cut, easy smile. Riley scored a hit, and the young man clapped him on the shoulder. "He's got great instincts," he said, standing and turning to us. "I'm Liam Cooper. I coach the senior group, but I keep an eye on the little ones, too." He extended his hand to me first. As his sleeve pulled back, I saw a small, dark mole on the inside of his wrist. Oval, slightly raised. My heart stuttered. Riley had the exact same mark, same position, same shape. I'd noticed it the day I first held him. "Laura Romano," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "And this is my husband, Carlo." Liam extended his hand. Carlo shook it, said nothing. Liam talked to me for a few minutes about Riley's progress, his footwork, his reaction time, how quickly he picked things up. He was warm, articulate, and genuinely enthusiastic. I asked questions. He leaned against the railing beside me when he answered. Normal, friendly, nothing more. Carlo sat 2 chairs away, his ankle crossed over his knee, scrolling on his phone. He didn't look up once. He didn't join the conversation. He didn't need to. The stillness radiating off him filled the entire observation deck. The car ride home was silent. Riley chattered from the back seat about a move called a riposte that Liam had shown him. Carlo drove with one hand on the wheel, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road. We walked through the front door. Riley bolted upstairs to wash up. The door hadn't fully closed behind me when Carlo's hand caught my elbow, spun me around, and pressed me back against the foyer wall. Both hands slammed onto my waist. His mouth was on mine, not gentle, not asking. "Carlo, what are you—" I started, but he didn't let me finish. "You are my wife, mia cara." His voice was low, his breath warm against my jaw. "You sleep in my bed." But I watched the way you looked at him for 15 minutes, and every second of it I was deciding how to break him. "He's Riley's fencing coach," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was being polite. "You were smiling," he murmured against my skin. "People smile, Carlo." I pressed my palm against his chest. "It's a social convention." He kissed me again, and I let it go on longer than I should have. His hand slid up my back, pulling me closer, and my fingers found his collar the way they always did, automatic, without permission from the rest of me. When I finally pulled back, both of us breathing unevenly, I put my hand flat against his chest. I wasn't looking at Liam Cooper, Carlo. I was looking at his wrist. The heat in his face cooled instantly. His wrist. He has a birthmark, identical to Riley's, same shape, same position. I held his gaze. "Riley isn't my biological son." His hand stilled on my waist. The grip loosened, but he didn't let go. "I know," he said. "I've known since before the wedding. After you left, I kept track of you. Not constantly, but enough. When you came back from Florence with a child, the timeline didn't add up. I looked into it." "You've been watching me for 7 years?" "I've been waiting for 7 years. I was looking for the right moment to come back to you." His hands resettled on my waist, steady, warm. "Tell me what happened." So I told him. All of it. I told him about Florence, walking home from the university library late at night, and finding a girl collapsed on the dark sidewalk. She was barely 20 and 7 months pregnant. Her name was Jasmine. By the time the ambulance reached the hospital, the doctors couldn't save her, but they managed to deliver her baby through emergency surgery. A tiny boy, struggling for his life, hooked up to a tangle of machines inside a glass incubator. When the police finally investigated, they told me Jasmine had no family left. Her parents were dead, and there was absolutely no one to claim the baby. "I signed the adoption papers the next day," I said. "I didn't speak fluent Italian. I barely understood the paperwork, but I looked at that baby and I knew." Carlo pulled me against his chest, his arms around me, solid and still. "Riley is the best thing that ever happened to me. He gave me a reason to stop running, and if Liam Cooper is connected to Jasmine, if he's Riley's biological father—" "Then I'll handle it. Riley is mine. Nobody is taking him from us." 2 weeks later, Liam Cooper knocked on our front door. He stood on the porch in a pressed shirt, a leather folder in his hands, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He handed me the folder, and I opened it to find a set of legal documents, a formal paternity claim with a DNA comparison request, a petition for custody review, and a letter from an attorney I'd never heard of. "I don't want to make this ugly, Mrs. Romano," Liam said, his hands in his pockets, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "But that's my son in there, and I have rights. We can do this quietly, or we can do it in court. Your choice." I closed the folder. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred at the edges, and the ground felt unsteady beneath me. I managed to close the door in his face before my legs gave out. I called Carlo from the kitchen floor, Riley's lunchbox still open on the counter above me, and when his voice came through the line, I couldn't hold it together anymore. He came to the house, Carlo. He had papers, custody papers. He's going to try to take Riley. Where is Riley? Upstairs, napping. Carlo, if he... I'm 15 minutes away. Don't open the door again. Don't call anyone else. He was there in 12. He found me still on the kitchen floor and pulled me up into his arms and held me while I broke apart. Ugly, gasping, desperate. He held me through all of it without saying a word, his hand on the back of my head, his chin resting on top of it, until my breathing slowed enough to form sentences. Nobody is taking that boy, he said. His voice was calm and absolute. I'm going to handle this. Do you trust me? I nodded against his chest. 3 days later, Carlo arranged a meeting at the house. Liam came with his father, Jack Cooper, late 60s, silver hair, tailored suit, the composed posture of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Carlo sat beside me at the dining table, his hand resting on mine, while his attorney laid out the evidence. Jack Cooper spoke first. I mean no disrespect, Mrs. Romano, but Riley is my grandson, my blood. I can't leave him in the custody of people who share no biological connection to him. I've raised him since he was 2 pounds in an incubator, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I've held him through every fever, every nightmare, every first day of school. Don't sit in my house and tell me I'm not connected to my own son. Biologically, she is his aunt. Every head turned to Carlo. He reached into the folder his attorney had prepared and slid a document across the table. Jasmine's full name was Jasmine Wrong. She was the daughter of Pearl Wrong. He looked at me and his eyes were steady, certain, holding me in place. Your mother, Laura, she had another daughter. Jasmine was your half-sister. The dining room contracted around me. I gripped the edge of the table with both hands. My mother had another daughter. The girl I found dying on a Florence sidewalk, the girl whose baby I carried out of a hospital and raised as my own, was my sister. I never knew she existed. I never knew my mother had built another family after she destroyed ours. And Riley, my Riley, was my blood. He had always been my blood. The adoption is legally sound, Carlo's attorney said to Jack Cooper. And given the biological connection between Mrs. Romano and the child's mother, any custody challenge will be dismissed. Additionally, Mr. Cooper, he turned to Liam, we have documentation of your involvement with Jasmine Lynn Wrong in Florence, including what you put her through, and your abandonment of a pregnant girl who didn't survive the night. If this goes to court, that record becomes public. Jack Cooper's composure cracked. His eyes went from his son to the documents, then to Carlo. I'll withdraw the petition, Jack said quietly, but I want to know my grandson. When Riley is old enough to decide that for himself, he can, Carlo said. Until then, he stays with us. This is not a negotiation. The Coopers left. I sat at the dining table staring at the document with Jasmine's full name on it until Carlo's hand covered mine. You knew, I whispered. How long have you known she was my sister? I found out a few days ago. I had Liam investigated just in case. Jasmine's identity came up in the background check. And my mother? Pearl died of an illness, Laura, 2 years ago. I pressed my palms flat against the table and breathed through the pressure building behind my ribs. My mother was dead. My sister was dead. And the only piece of either of them that survived was sleeping upstairs in a bedroom with dinosaur sheets. Riley padded downstairs 20 minutes later, rubbing his eyes. He walked straight past me and climbed into Carlo's lap. He pressed his face into Carlo's shirt and mumbled something I couldn't hear. What was that, buddy? Carlo asked. Riley pulled back and looked up at him with swollen, sleepy eyes. You're my real daddy, right? Carlo's throat worked. He looked at me over Riley's head. I nodded. Yeah, buddy. His voice was rough. I'm your real dad. Riley wrapped his arms around Carlo's neck and closed his eyes. Carlo held him and didn't move for a long time. My father came to dinner the following Sunday after Riley was in bed and Carlo was cleaning up the kitchen. My father found me on the back porch, standing among the lilies, staring at nothing. He loves you, Laura. Dad. Don't dad me. I have eyes. That man rearranged his entire life to stand next to you. He fought for your son. He told an entire city you were his first love, And you're out here standing in flowers he planted for you, still trying to convince yourself it isn't real. My eyes burned. You know why I can't do this. Because of your mother. He stepped closer. His voice softened. Sweetheart, your mother broke my heart. She broke yours too, and I will never forgive her for what she did to you. But her mistakes don't decide how you live the rest of your life. What if he leaves? What if I let him in and then you'll still have me. You'll always have me. But Laura, he took my face in both hands, the way he used to when I was small and crying over scraped knees. I didn't raise you to hide from things that scare you. I raised you to face them. So face this. That man in there is not your mother, and you are not a little girl anymore. I cried. I stood in the garden and cried in my father's arms and didn't try to stop it. I didn't know Carlo was standing in the kitchen doorway. I didn't know he'd heard everything. But when my father went home and I walked inside, Carlo was sitting on the bottom step of the staircase. He looked up at me and his eyes were red. Your father is right, he said. About all of it. How much did you hear? Enough. He stood up. I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. I waited. When you broke up with me in that diner, you said all the right words. You were convincing, you were cold, but your hands were shaking, Laura. Your left hand was gripping the edge of the table so hard, your knuckles were white. And when you stood up to leave, your eyes were wet. You blinked it away before the tears could fall, but I saw it. My chest seized. I knew you didn't mean it. I knew something else was driving you. Your father's expectations, your fear, whatever it was, and I swore that I would become someone you couldn't walk away from. He took a step toward me. I went back to my father's house, a man I hadn't spoken to in years. I took the Romano name and I played his game and I built everything I have now, and I did it for one reason. You. Carlo. This marriage wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate or coincidence or luck. When I found out your father was looking for a Romano alliance, I put myself in Giovanni's place. Every meeting, every negotiation, every conversation that led to our wedding, I made it happen. Because I am still that stupid boy from the garage who can't stop loving you, no matter how many times you tell me not to. I stood there hallway with tears running down my face, unable to speak. The lilies, he said. My mother used to say that if you surround someone with white lilies, you're asking happiness to come back to them. I planted them the night the wedding date was confirmed. For you. He was standing right in front of me now, close enough to touch. I know you're scared, Laura, but I am not your mother. I am not leaving. I never left, even when you told me to. I reached up and pressed my palm against the left side of his chest. Under my hand, his heart was pounding, fast, hard, completely at odds with the steadiness of his voice. He'd been terrified this entire time. I don't know how to do this, I said. My voice broke on the last word. You don't have to know how. I got you. I kissed him. I kissed him because I was tired of running and he was the only place I'd ever wanted to stop. His phone rang 40 minutes later. He answered it in Italian, his voice shifting into the low, clipped cadence he used for family business. The conversation was short. When he hung up, his jaw was set. I have to go. The Calabrese faction is pushing back on the port agreement. If I don't show up tonight, they'll take it as a sign of weakness. Tonight? Right now? I'll be back in a few hours. He kissed my forehead. Don't wait up. I waited up. Of course I waited up. At midnight, his friend Sal called. Laura, you need to come get your husband. He's at the Giordano estate in Coral Gables, and he's had enough bourbon to floor a horse. The meeting ran long, and he's been matching the Calabrese boss drink for the last 3 hours trying to close this deal. He won't let anyone drive him home. I drove to the estate in pajama pants and a sweatshirt, my hair pulled back, no makeup, and found Carlo in a courtyard full of cigar smoke and empty glasses. He was slumped in a chair, tie undone, shirt open at the collar, while 2 men tried to help him to his feet. I reached for his arm. He yanked it back. Don't touch me. Carlo, it's me. I said don't. His eyes were glazed, barely focusing. He pushed the men away and nearly fell over. Only my wife is allowed to touch me. Nobody else. Where is my wife? I want my wife. Carlo? I stepped directly in front of him and took his face in both hands. Look at me. It's Laura. I'm your wife. He squinted at me, blinked. His hands came up and covered mine, holding them against his face. Laura? Yes, you came. Of course I came. His whole body sagged forward into mine. I caught him, barely, and his arms wrapped around me, his face buried in my neck, his weight pressing me backward. "I told them," he mumbled against my skin. "I told them nobody can touch me. Only you." "I know." I held him up. "Let's go home." Sal helped me get him into the car. He fell asleep with his head in my lap before we left the driveway, my fingers in his hair, the Miami skyline sliding past the windows. Somewhere between carrying him up the stairs and pulling off his shoes, he woke up. And this time, when he kissed me, I didn't look for excuses. The morning light was warm on my face when I opened my eyes. Carlo was still asleep, one arm slung across my stomach, his breathing deep and even. The bedroom door creaked. Small footsteps padded across the hardwood. Riley appeared at the edge of the bed in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed rabbit. "Can I come in?" I pulled back the covers. He scrambled up and burrowed between us, his cold feet pressing against my legs, his head finding the space between my shoulder and Carlo's chest. Carlo stirred, opened one eye, and looked down at the boy wedged against him. "Morning, buddy." "Morning, Daddy." Riley yawned and pulled the covers up to his chin. "Are we a family now?" Carlo looked at me over Riley's head. I nodded. "Yeah," Carlo said, "we're a family." Riley closed his eyes, satisfied. Within 30 seconds, he was asleep again. Carlo reached across our son and found my hand. His fingers laced through mine and squeezed. "Marry me," he whispered. I almost laughed. "We're already married, Carlo." "That was a contract. I want the real thing." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. "So, marry me. For real this time." Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Tell me, did you enjoy the soft love and undying devotion in this one? Or do you prefer darker romance stories? Let me know in the comments what you loved, what you hated, and what kind of story you want to see next. And hit subscribe, because tomorrow I'm posting a story about a mafia boss who's loved the same woman across 3 lifetimes. And what happens when he has to lose her and find her and save her all over again. Until next time, have a sweet little life.